Hello and welcome to this review of our OPTO leadership reports. We will go through both reports, and I want to clarify that one is a summary of the other. We will start with the one that is the most detailed and comprehensive, the one that you see in front of you. I also want to remind you that the reports are intended for you as the user, as well as your stakeholders if you use OPTO leadership in recruitment. If you're working with coaching leaders, you can also provide this report to the test taker. It is called the Leadership Report and begins, like all our other reports, with a cover page that includes the name of the assessment and of the test participant, and it also indicates what type of report it is. The second page is an introduction page. As usual, it provides information about the OPTO test itself, the norm group used, how it is distributed across the scales, and so on. On page 3, we start to see some differences compared to our usual reports, beginning with more information about OPTO leadership and the report itself. We also see how everything is connected, starting with the test at the beginning of the process, followed by the applied leadership theories, which then lead to the OPTO leadership perspective that this report represents. This report has a total of 15 pages and is divided into 3 parts. The first one, there is a section about the actual test results, and then there's a section about the versatile leadership, and finally a section about the optimized leadership. At the bottom of page 3, there is also some additional information about the test taker's rights. On page 4, we move into the actual results. For those of you who are familiar with working with OPTO, you'll notice that we go deeper than usual. Typically, we work at the dimension level, where there are 8 traits. But here, you can see that we've gone deeper and examine our 20 aspects. These are presented in the same order as they appear in OPTO. And you'll also notice a short line of text for each trait. This is generic and describes what the scale measures, not the participant's results. As we turn the pages, we see the aspects presented in descending order. We start with the trait that has received the highest score and end with the one that has received the lowest score. Moving on to page 6, we focused on the 3 aspects that received the highest scores. At the top, we see information about what the scores mean, what constitutes high scores, medium scores, and so on. Then we delve into the 3 aspects in detail. To the right of the result presentation, you see strengths associated with these types of behaviors. On the opposite side, we see the potential pitfalls of such behaviors. Here, we are no longer aligning the results with a specific role or position, saying that strengths and pitfalls depends on the role. Instead, we explain that high scores inherently come with both strengths and pitfalls. There is also a description of how these tendencies might manifest in practice. Below that, there's a brief prompt to the test taker, which reoccurs at several points in the report. It encouraged them to reflect on the statements above, when these behaviors might occur, and what they might look like. This ensures that they have examples ready when it's time for a coaching session. As we move on, we come to the 3 lowest scores, the opposite side of the spectrum. Here again, we can see a description. We see the 3 lowest scores and a description of that. And again, strengths on one side and pitfalls on the other. Finally, there's once more a prompt for the test participant to reflect. After that, we move into the first of the 2 sections connected to the leadership theories we use in OPTO leadership. The first section is called Versatile Leadership, where we examine 4 pairs of aspects, as you are likely familiar with by now. First, there's a brief explanation of what versatile leadership means, followed by the participants' results, and below that we have a visual representation of the results. And alongside it, there's a text that explains the components of the matrix, what the various blue areas represent, and what it means to fall within them. On the next page, we dive deeper, exploring each pair of aspects in detail. We start with a pair called compassionate assertiveness. There is a brief description of what it entails, which the two aspects are, and then again the matrix. But this time showing only the first point. Additionally, there's an analysis of the results, both on the right side of the matrix and beneath the image. Moving on, we come to the next pair of aspects, called serene drive. The same structure applies here, a brief description of the aspects followed by the matrix and accompanying analysis. On page 11, we cover humble confidence, and after that comes the final pair of aspects, called co-ingenuity. By this point, we will have completed an in-depth analysis of all four aspect pairs within what we refer to as versatile leadership. As we continue, we enter the final section of this report, which focuses on the second leadership theory linked to emotional intelligence. We begin with a description of the term optimized leadership. Here we see how the OPTO results are combined with emotional intelligence to calculate a match percentage for the four behavioral scales that make up what we define as optimized leadership. A match percentage is provided at an overall level, and on the following pages we break it down into the four components. Below the description, you can see each behavioral scale along with the participants' results. The gray area in the background represents the international group of leaders we use for comparison. It's worth noting that it's not common to achieve a perfect score of 100%. We provide guidelines for what constitutes as good match. Usually we consider 75% and above as a good match, but in OPTO leadership, we define 65 to 90% as a good match, while 90% to 100% is a perfect match, and the higher score, the better. We also see a brief general description of each of these behavioral scales. As we continue through the report, we get a deeper analysis of each scale, starting with executive well-being. Here we see the match percentage, and below that, the test participants' specific results. On the right-hand side, there is an explanation of what characterizes executive well-being and a description of what a perfect match would look like. In this case, the participants scored 97%, which is considered a perfect match. However, for areas where the test taker does not have a perfect match, there will be a difference between the description of their results and the description of a perfect match. Below the first section, we find the scale called sociability. And on the next page, we see the analysis for grounded support and self-regulation. That was the more detailed report. Now we will look at the more summarized version, primarily designed for recruiting managers and other stakeholders. If we look at the first page, it's identical to the detailed report, except that it also says Executive Summary. You'll notice that the two reports are very similar, but this one is shorter and contains fewer details. On page 2, there is the introduction page, but on page 3, we start to see some differences. At the top, there's a match against the role for which the candidate has applied, provided a functional criteria has been set. For example, if we are recruiting in a CFO, this match would relate to that position. Meanwhile, the rest of the report shows match percentages against the leadership theories we use. If the test is being used solely for development purposes, there will be no match here, unless you also want to consider it. Below that, we have, just like in the standard OPTO reports, the top drivers of performance, meaning the two dimensions with the highest scores. Beneath that, we also see the aspects with the highest scores, providing an additional layer of detail not included in the regular OPTO reports. When we turn to page 4, we see the participants' result presented in the usual format, so this is identical to what is in the detailed report. The following page is also the same, showing the aspects in descending order. Moving on, we see the versatile leadership section. Here we do not include the in-depth analysis. Instead, we only present the overview. The same applies for the optimized leader section. That's all for the reports for OPTO leadership. Thank you for watching.